2 years old Gage Wayment had a close relationship with his father, Paul. Gage's mother and father had separated before this incident. Gage's father loved spending time in the outdoor and he took Gage with him any chance he had. The two were inseparable. Paul was a construction worker and was raised in a Mormon church. He didn't drink alcohol or use drugs. On October 25, 2001, Paul put Gage in the back seat of his Dodge pickup truck and drove to a private deer hunting spot on the east side of the Chalk Creek Basin in Utah. The two reached the gate of the private property. Paul got off his car, entered the lock combination on the door, opened it, drove inside the private property and relocked the door again. It was around noon when Paul stopped his car to scout for some deer. He looked at Gage and he was asleep in the back seat with his blue pajamas that covered his feet. Paul was planning to be gone for a short period of time, so he decided to leave Gage in the car. Gage was strapped in his seat. Paul started looking for deer and saw a group of hunters along the way. He started talking with the group and got preoccupied. After 30 to 90 minutes of being gone, he returned to his car to find out Gage was gone. The door on the side of Gage was also open. Paul started looking for his son and after not finding anything, he drove to the camp in the private land and saw the two other hunters who he talked to earlier. At the time Gage went missing, there were only these 3 men in the private property that the officials were aware of. Paul asked them about Gage and they told him when they were passing by Paul's car, they saw his son in the car smiling and he looked fine. They thought the father was somewhere close by. The hunters agreed to help and the 3 left the camp to look for Gage. The men searched for the 2 years old and after not having any luck, they contacted the county sheriff. The county sheriff came with help to comb the area. As the cops were trying to gather facts, Paul started vomiting, saying if Gage died, it was his fault. Paul eventually calmed down and gave the necessary information. By the midnight of the same day, a snowstorm started and temperature got really cold. There were some talks that Gage wouldn't be able to even survive the first night. During the search, Paul kept saying this was his fault and wasn't sidestepping from taking responsibility by any chance. Volunteers, helicopters and bloodhound dogs helped with the search without finding a single clue. On the 4th day of the search, the county sheriff terminated the effort, stating they couldn't find Gage. There was some speculation that Gage was kidnapped, but it was dismissed when they realized the access to the private property is controlled by a lock and a gate. The 2 hunters and Paul was the only people who were in the area when Gage vanished. When the official search for Gage was terminated, the next morning 150 private citizens came to help. James Wilkes was among the searchers. James is a short-haired, clean-cut man who was also a Mormon. While all other searchers were in pairs, James was alone with his dog searching an area far from all other searchers. In the afternoon of that day, other searchers realized they hadn't seen James or his dog. Darkness hit the area and James was still missing. At that point, it was determined James and his dog were missing as well. James found a small hole under a tree and spent the night there with his dog. He wasn't sure if he had slept at all that night. It was one of the coldest nights of the year. James woke up around 5 a.m. and started to walk back when suddenly, just after 5 minutes of walking, His dog ran to a small bulge buried in 5 inches of snow. James got to his dog's possession and saw it was licking a kid's face. It was Gage. Gage was lying on a fetal position facing uphill under the snow. His hands were clenched in fists, his eyes were open and there was frozen tears in them. His blue pajamas were pulled down to his knees and his throat was blue. Gage was dead. James took the boy and saw canine tracks close to Gage which didn't belong to his dog. Gage was found 2 miles from the location he was last seen. James tried very hard to find his way back to search headquarters. After walking for several hours, he had to put Gage down on a fence line. He had to walk another few hours to finally reach the headquarters. James told the deputies about his finding and they went and retrieved the body. When Gage's dad was told of James' finding, he was devastated. Paul took a polygraph test and the question was whether Paul and James plotted together to kill Gage. Paul passed the test. Paul took full responsibility of the incident and believed it was his fault. He had difficulty understanding how Gage could get out of the car. Paul's sister stated he would go out to his truck and work the locks and buckles to see how Gage was able to do it. An autopsy was done on the body of Gage and it was determined he died from exposure, but it wasn't determined when that happened. Investigators took their case to a prosecutor. The personal feeling of the investigators and the prosecutor was that Paul was a type of guy who lived with the guilt for the rest of his life. They believed that was enough punishment. The judge, however, had a different feeling about the case. He believed Paul left the child for too long in a cold weather strapped in the car. Eventually, Paul was charged with 1 count of misdemeanor negligent homicide. Around this time, the media was sending lots of hatred towards Paul for his negligence. He eventually pled guilty. Paul himself wanted to pay a price for his actions. He went to the location where Gage's dead body was found and meditated regularly. He eventually built a small shrine there. Paul talked to his sister about the feeling of committing suicide, but he countered it with his religious beliefs that if he ever did that, his soul would not reach the same eternal resting area as others who died naturally under God's grace. Paul was sentenced to 30 days of jail, and the judge asked him when he wanted to start his sentence. Paul said the very next morning. When Paul was leaving the courthouse, he told his sister he would go where Gage's body was found to meditate. The next morning came and Paul didn't show up for his sentence. His sister tried to contact him, but she had no success. She and several other individuals went to Paul's meditation location and found the dead body of Paul along with his rifle. He had committed suicide. Remember, canine tracks were seen close to the dead body of Gage when he was found. Why didn't the dogs reacted if the body was there when they showed up? Gage was found 2 miles from the spot they last seen him. The area they found the dead body was searched multiple times before the finding and nothing was there at those times. We will never know what really happened to Gage. On March 7, 1961, 4 years old Jimmy Frank was with his father in the barn while his father was doing daily work. The family lived at Winthrop, Iowa. At some point in the afternoon, Jimmy told his father he was cold and his father sent him home. Jimmy started walking towards the home, but only after walking 30 feet, His father returned his head to check on him, but he wasn't there. The father ran to the house and couldn't find Jimmy. He started searching the area, and after some time other family children arrived from school and started helping with the search for the 4-year-old. At night, the heaviest snowstorm of the season hit Winthrop. After not having any success, the county sheriff was contacted and a search effort was organized. 500 locals were helping with the search as well. Jimmy had a canine dog who was always on his side all the time. During the search, his canine sat in an area between the house and the barn and didn't move. After 3 weeks of searching non-stop, the sheriff decided to give searchers a rest and resume after a week. The sheriff told the press they had searched the area inch by inch and that they were considering foul play. It's worth mentioning there are 3 large rivers in this area. On April 1st, the county sheriff resumed the search and they did the same search patterns that they had done for all the previous weeks. Only after 45 minutes into the search, they found the body of the 4-year-old Jimmy. The body was in a small gully only 385 yards from the farm of his parents. When they found the body, Jimmy's boots were missing and he didn't have his mittens. The medical examiner stated Jimmy froze to death. It's not clear why a 4-year-old who earlier stated he was cold and was going home would go another way to harm's way. What really happened to Jimmy remains a mystery to this day. On September 3rd, 1981, 2-year-old Justin Staley was playing with his dog in the yard around noon while his parents were in the house. At some point, his parents came to check on him, but they couldn't find Justin or the dog. The farm was located in Ocheyedan, Iowa. There are lots of small lakes and ponds in this region. The parents searched the immediate area and then notified the authorities for assistance. 4,000 searchers came to help along with helicopters equipped with heat-seeking equipment called FLIR. The family farm was surrounded by barbed wire which all the searchers and the parents believed Justin couldn't get over. The group searched the farm for few days without finding anything. At that point, the sheriff stated they were terminating the search. George DeGroot was a local farmer who was helping with the search. He asked a psychic if she could help. The psychic helped George draw a map. At night, George went to the field to find the boy. At around 10 p.m., he was getting ready to quit when he heard a crying sound from a small boy. He called for the boy and the whimper got louder. He started running towards the sound and found Justin lying in a cornfield in an adjacent farm to the Staley's property where Justin was lost initially. Justin was taken to a doctor and he said he was in a good condition and not dehydrated. Parents and searchers believed Justin couldn't get over the fence. How did he do it? Also, there was no trees or large boulders in the farm, so the helicopter with the FLIR equipment should have been able to see Justin if he was there. There is no report to indicate whether the dog was found or not. Justin didn't say anything about his experience and we will never know what went on during the time he was missing.